Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Hilly's educational seminar today. It's our public interest career path panel. And this seminar is one of my favorites each year. It's where we bring dedicated public interest law attorneys to share their experiences about charting a career path in public interest law. And so, as always, I have my list of questions, my planned questions, but I want to make sure that you all get the answers that you want to the questions that you have. So chat me if you have questions. Happy to have you ask those questions, or just, if there's a good point, unmute yourself, turn on your video and ask a question. And we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that you get your questions answered. And then today is a special educational seminar. Extra special because we have our after the educational seminar breakout discussions. So if there are things that were mentioned today that that might be ample for discussion, we might talk about the implicit bias session that was last week, hear about the experience that other interns are having at their sites this summer. So just a chance for you to meet other interns who are also at public interest agencies working this summer. So with that, I will start our public interest law career path session. Excited to have three great panelists. We have Mona Elgindy, who's a staff attorney at Prairie State Legal Services, Patrick Keenan-Devlin, who's an executive director at the James B. Moran Center for Youth Advocacy, and Kejai McNeal, who's an assistant public guardian in the juvenile division of the Cook County Office of the Public Guardian. So thank you three for joining us. Let's just start off with brief introductions. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your current role at your agency, any major past positions, and what made you want to get into public interest and get for this career path. So Mona, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Brent, for the invitation. This is exciting. So I'm glad to share with all of you a little bit about my experience. So I am a staff attorney at Prairie State Legal Services. I work with our elder law grant program. So I work with our senior clients in Will and Grundy County. I have been here for about 8 years. I graduated law school 11 years ago. And I went to law school a little later in my career. So honestly, I had no clue what I wanted to do. What kind of brought me to Prairie State was not planned at all, I'll say. My first 1L year in law school, there was, I remember, an advertisement in the county where I live that they needed an Arabic interpreter at Will County Legal Assistance. And I didn't know what that was. And I was like, oh, great, that's something I can do. And I took that position. I interned for a year, and I discovered legal aid, which I knew nothing about. I was like, this is so cool. That office actually became Prairie State Legal Services. And so when I graduated law school, I always knew through law school I wanted to do public interest law, but I had no idea kind of where I wanted to do it. So I pretty much interned in every place you can imagine. And when I graduated law school and I started working, not in public interest law, just because I wasn't able to get a position right out of law school, I knew I wanted to do it even more, I think, working in private practice. And as soon as there was an opportunity to apply at Prairie State, I took it. And I've been very happy to say that I'm here ever since, enjoying what I do. I don't really think I could ever practice privately. Just because I kind of love the work being what I do and not worries about obviously billing and all those types of things. So that's basically how I got here. I am the co-chair for our Elder Law Task Force at Prairie State. We've got 10 offices in Northern Illinois. So we basically cover all of Northern Illinois minus Cook County. And so I am a part of the task force that oversees all of our senior attorneys who work with our senior clients. So we get to see a lot of different type of legal issues that affect the elderly seniors in our county regions.
Thanks, Mona. Patrick, how about you?
Thanks, Brent. So again, my name is Patrick Keenan-Devlin, and I'm the Executive Director at the James B. Moran Center for Youth Advocacy. I have been in my current role, actually, I think it was on Friday. It was my 5th year anniversary as Executive Director, and it was my 9th year anniversary being on staff at the Moran Center. So I went to Loyola Law, go Ramblers, and at Loyola, I entered in thinking very clearly that I was going to be a consumer protection attorney. I was an antitrust and consumer protection fellow at Loyola. And by the way, I thought that all of my compatriots in the fellowship were also similarly positioned. And then I think it was my first seminar, I realized, I said, oh, some of these folks actually want to be defense lawyers, so represent companies fighting back against antitrust statutes. That was kind of a wake-up call. But I always wanted to be plaintiff side doing consumer protection work. And so I clerked for 2 years in Lisa Madigan's office, the Attorney General for the state of Illinois, in her consumer protection division, and loved every second of it. And I fell into child advocacy because I think we're going to be talking about it today. Networking. I met the executive director at one point of the Moran Center. Her name was Naria Santalucia. And she said, you know, I think you would really like working with children. I said, oh, I've never worked with children. I'm not a teacher. I don't. She said, no, come work with me one summer. And so I clerked with her. I put a pause on my attorney general's position, and I went to go work at the Moran Center, and I clerked. And while I clerked, I continued to network. And when I graduated law school, they offered me a staff attorney position. So that, you know, Bren asked us about any critical internship opportunities. I mean, my internship at the Moran Center led to my staff attorney position. And so for the first 4 years at the Moran Center, I was the juvenile defender for our community. And then I also served as the special education attorney, you know, having two caseloads at any given time. Now, as executive director, if anybody has questions about juvenile delinquency practice, I still practice in juvenile court. So I'm not, you know, a fake lawyer. I still do some lawyering, not as much as my other colleagues on the panel, but I do still use that license ever so often. So I think that that's it. So thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Patrick. And Kejai, tell us a little bit more about your path and what made you get into public interest law.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kejai McNeal. I am currently at the Office of the Cook County Public Guardian. I'm in the Child Protection Division. So I currently represent minors from birth all the way to 21 in abuse, neglect, and delinquency cases. My path is a little unique. I actually chose my law school because I wanted to work the position that I'm currently working. I went to Loyola. I did a dual degree master's and JD program because I wanted to work this position that I'm currently in. So I kind of sort of had a full circle moment when I worked this job. I am a year and 5 months into my current role. And I knew that I wanted to practice public interest law, and I've always wanted to be where there is the most need. So I didn't want to go and work in corporate or private where I was making corporations richer or where I wasn't doing any direct service work. I thrive off direct service, and I wanted to be where there's the most need. I thought about what brings me the most joy and the most pain at the same time, and it was children. And so that's how I charted my path to where I am. I did do internships. I was a double Killy at CVLS. And so I started out in the minor guardianship program and the adult guardianship program. Then I added to my caseload and started doing family law and adoption work there. I also did a equal justice work fellowship. And so I worked at Legal Aid Society with Metropolitan Family Services, where I worked with human trafficking victims and survivors. doing some immigration work with them and securing different types of visas for them. And then I left and came to my current role where I am now. So yeah, that is about me, and that is how I got to where I am. My current role, while I am now, I will say networking is key. I interned in the office as an externship in law school, and I made connections, and I happened to even make a connection with the then public guardian at the time. And so when I wanted to apply for the job, he did recommend me for the position. And so while they weren't hiring at the time, they kept a file on me. And when they had permission to hire, they did give me a call and asked me, was I still interested in working at the office?
That's great. So there are a lot of myths surrounding a public interest career. I think that you've even touched on a couple of them in these introductions, but are there any that you've found to be inaccurate or false, or even others that are true, that they ring with some truth? Mona, do you want to start us again with any that you found?
Sure. So I don't know if this was a myth, but for whatever reason, I just assumed that in public interest work, you're really on your own. You get like thrown into the water and you need to learn how to swim. And I would say that was very much the opposite of what my experience was working at the legal aid agency that I'm in. Funny thing I was going to mention is I also went to Loyola. So I was like, oh, there's a theme here. We're all Loyola grads. But that was a very pleasant surprise that I did not expect. There was so much support when I started of just people doing this work and all of us wanting to support each other. And, the cases that we have, I mean, essentially how our office is organized, we are all we don't have a specialty. I mean, my specialty is my client base, but essentially anything affecting, basic needs of a senior, affecting their housing, their safety, their security, their independence, their autonomy is going to be something we can potentially see if they qualify for our services. So you're going to get a lot of different kind of cases and you have to kind of be ready. And so there was always a network there within our agency. And I would even say in our sister legal aid agencies to share templates, to share strategies, to share tips with, what works in front of this judge, what works in front of this administrative agency, who are your contacts, which I very much appreciated when I started.
Patrick, how about you?
I feel stumped on this one. I don't know if I had any myth-busting moments in my career upon entering into this profession. I don't know if I have one for you, Brent.
Okay.
I struggled with this in preparing for today. I can't think of one.
That's all right. Keisha, what about you? Have you found any myths or anything that even rings true?
I don't necessarily have a myth or any myths that I had or that I've come across actually working in the field as a licensed attorney. But I do know when I was in law school, one of the things, and I'll never forget this, and this is actually how I came across Pilly. They would say, if you want to work in public interest, then you couldn't get a paid internship. And so then you'll have to work different odd jobs over the summer in order to pay your rent. And so I was determined to prove people wrong. I'm like, no, there's got to be some way where I can do the type of work that I'm interested in doing and have a paid internship with it. And so I did my research and I did find Pilly, as well as I worked with Just the Beginning program at the time. Now it's Just the Beginning, a pipeline organization. And that was also paid work. And so I would say that was quote unquote a myth because it was heavily ingrained. And that was what I came across all the time when people found out I wanted to do public interest. It was like, well, you're not really going to find a paid internship in this field. So you should seek other opportunities and then just work the clinics in the law school during the semester, and you can still go into the field that way. So I would say for me, that was a myth, if you will.
Great. So our next question comes from McKenna. So McKenna, I'll pass it to you to ask the panel your question.
Hi, I wanted to ask if you all had any specific advice for interviewing for public interest positions.
So does anyone want to take a stab at that first? Patrick, I see you're unmuted.
Sure. So one piece of advice I have, and it's very unfair, but too bad, is that after you interview, send me a thank you note. Again, I know that's silly and probably snarky of me, but I do keep a list of who followed up by email and who did not. And the legal profession is that of detail, which they don't necessarily teach you in law school, but it is the most critical piece of being a good lawyer is the details. And that to me reflects that you know how to follow up. It also can serve as a really good writing sample if I haven't requested that you submit a writing sample at that point. Because I will also tell you that 98% of legal writing is actually email. It is not briefs, motions. It is just the mundane communication that we have to have with opposing counsel, that we have to have with our clients, that we have to have with prosecutors, right? But when Brent kind of tipped us off that might be a question today, that was the first thing that popped in my mind, that thank you emails are really important to interviewers.
That's a great tip. Kejai, how about you? Any advice specifically for interviewing for public interest positions?
I would definitely say follow up. Do the follow-up email. I always made sure once I left in an interview, once I got home, or whether I was at an internship and left to go to my interview, once I got back to the office, I made it a priority to send a follow-up email. And I will also say, if you're asked a question in an interview and at that moment you don't have a response because it's something that you need some time to think about, then don't be afraid when you send that follow-up email to answer that question after you've really given it some thorough thought and you can give a substantive answer to whatever question that was asked of you. Another thing, I never go into an interview, or I never went into an interview without having a list of questions that I wanted to ask the interviewer. And some of those questions for me was questions about their management style, questions about the data, like what the day-to-day looks like, and their expectations in a candidate who is working for them. So I will say, make sure that you do have some questions and that those questions will give you some substantive answers so you can make an informed decision if you are given an offer as to whether or not that's the right fit for you. And another thing, I always made sure that I went and I looked at the mission, and so that I can be sure, one, that what I am looking for, and this is an organization that aligns with that, and two, that I can make sure that I can tailor my cover letter and my work experience to the type of work that they do and what they aim to achieve with that work.
That's great. I think I always hear people talking about when an interviewer has been on the website, talks about pages on the website, like you've done your research, you've done your homework. Mona, how about you? What are any tips that you have for interviewing in legal aid?
I think you guys heard really good advice from both of our other panelists, and I would just second that. I would even say, I know our supervisor who does all the hiring, if you send a thank you card, you're in. And we would have arguments about candidates and like, well, this one sounds really good, but she'll say, well, this one sent me a thank you card, and I'm going to go with that because those things really matter. So I just going to say, definitely taking that extra step to follow up, to show your appreciation for the process, for the opportunity. And if you have any way to just kind of have your passion about the work come out in that interview, where you stand out from others. Because I think that's the challenge is, everybody, the nice thing about public interest work is like, it is a good cause, right? You want to serve underserved populations. You want to help the community. You want to help those who may not have the resources to help themselves. But you want to stand out from everyone who's going to be able to kind of make that case and say something more about why this is your passion, more than maybe some other type of work, right? That you know what the mission is, you believe in it, here's why you believe in it, here's what your personal experience or what what you've strove to do in law school. I know for me, in the jobs I didn't have a passion to have, it was clearly evident in my interviews that I didn't get those offers. But in a lot of those jobs where I did, I got the offers. I think it just, you don't want to hide that. You really want to show you care, because the reality is there are so many applicants for these jobs and they're all just as qualified. But, I know in legal aid, there can be a high turnaround just because they don't pay as much. So you want someone that you feel is there for more than just a paycheck out of law school. You want someone that's going to stick around, that really believes in the cause, and they're not just looking for a job.
Thanks. And McKenna, thank you for that question. That was a great question. If others have questions, we want to hear from you. Chat me, turn on your video, and we'll turn it to you to get the information that you want to hear. So kind of along this lines, can you all tell me a little bit about how you've interacted with the public interest law community, any recommendations that you have for building your network and your reputation as a law student, and even I think things are opening up, hopefully more, and hopefully in the fall will be more in person, but particularly with a thought of this summer while we are all virtually. Patrick, do you want to start us off again with this?
Sure. I would say, and I'm going to answer your question, Brent, but I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction and just say, I receive probably at least one email a day from a law student who wants an informational interview, or who wants to intern, or wants to apply for an Equal Justice Works Fellowship or a Skadden Fellowship. And taking those two different requests, because I put them in separate buckets, and tackling each one at a time. I will say that folks who reach out for informational interviews, who are persistent and who are very clear with their availability, and are very clear also, as Mona just mentioned, and upfront about what they are passionate about, I am far quicker to respond to those people. And I also appreciate people who do not hear from me writing to me again and saying, hey, I didn't hear from you. Don't do it the next day. I will never respond to you. If you email me on a Tuesday and on Wednesday, you say, I haven't heard from you, I will delete your email forever from my inbox. But with that said, if you don't hear from me in a week, I think that's reasonable to follow back up and politely say, I don't know if I got lost in your inbox, but still, I actually really appreciate that as a hiring supervisor at the agency, that you're passionate enough that and respectful enough that you follow back up with me. On the emails that I get cold from law students that want to pursue EJWs or Skaddens, etc., at the Moran Center, I have to admit, I am less inclined to be a sponsor of fellows who have not previously worked in my office. We have on occasion sponsored fellows who have not clerked at our office previously. And to be honest, some have worked out, some have not worked out. And I think it just lays, it further affirms my inclination that I really want to know you, and I want to have worked with you, and I want my staff to have worked with you before we commit to a 2-year marriage, which is essentially what a lot of these fellowships are. So just taking those in two different buckets, those are some thoughts.
Kejai, how about you? What are your thoughts?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So just on your interactions with the public interest law community, so how do you build your network? How do you build your reputation? What you can do as a law student, even before you've really applied, to make those connections, to even figure out if this is the right path for you.
Okay. For me, specifically as a law student, I made connections with my clinic directors in the clinics that I worked with in law school. I made connections with professors. I made connections with some deans in my school. I made sure that I went to networking events, and I'm naturally an introvert. So networking events is high anxiety for me. Like, I have to coach myself into and up to the event. But I made sure to go to networking events when I saw that there was networking events where there was going to be people who were working in the field that I wanted to work in. And so if it was networking events and it was dealing with the private sector, then I wasn't too much going to those because I knew I didn't want to work in the private sector. But when it came to those networking events where it was full of public interest attorneys and public interest attorneys were going to be there, then I made sure to go to those networking events and to make some meaningful connections, even if it was just one connection, because I don't really do elevator speech pitches and talks that well. I am more of a let's have a substantial conversation type of person. And so that's what I did. And at my internships and my externships, I also made connections with my supervisors or with the executive director. It just depended on our interaction and my opportunities that presented themselves. So I just made sure wherever I planted myself, that I made at least one significant connection. And quite frankly, those connections have taken me a very long way.
Mona, how about you? Have you, any advice that you have for law students on making connections in the public interest community, but also your thoughts on how you found the public interest community as a whole?
So, I mean, I found the public interest community kind of very, easier to network in than maybe the private world seemed to me, but I kind of always kept my distance maybe from that community. But a lot of my friends worked in that community. And so I felt like public interest came a lot easier to network. And I think because there may not be a lot of, competition for clients, for whatever, like the work is always there, right? There's never like this need to have work. So people really do look out to who is the best candidate to do this work. I think my advice is very similar to what you guys have already heard about, internships. Like, those are where so many opportunities come from. And I will say, like, I interned at so many places in law school just because I had no clue what I really wanted to do. And you will intern somewhere and you'll be like, I do not want to work here. And that's just really great to know, because you don't want to be finding that out, your first year of work, where it's a lot harder to make a change. So I would just say intern anywhere you think you might want to work, even if you're not 100% convinced, because I didn't think I would like legal aid as much as I did. And only after my internship was I like kind of wanting to work there. And then after I went into practice and I was working at a firm, like doing commercial litigation, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I want to go back to legal aid, because I remember what that made me feel like every day. Just the work is so meaningful to people's lives versus people's, bank accounts. It made a difference for me. And I think the other thing, as far as just networking, because I also wasn't great about networking, is just relationships. Just have good relationships with people, particularly some of my professors who I never expected. A lot of times job opportunities came to me from their recommendation. They knew people at agencies. They knew I was looking for a job. And I got interviews. And even when I didn't get those jobs, the person who interviewed me just really liked me, but knew that I didn't have the qualifications they were looking for. And they referred me to other jobs. So, you never know kind of where your good relationships with people where it will lead to. So, you know, as much as you can, have a good relationship with anyone who, you know, maybe it might be a partner at a firm that you'd never want to work in, but they might have a best friend that does the kind of work you do want to do, and they might pass your name along. So be a good person, be nice to whoever you can, and forthcoming, and you know, that good reputation, I think, can lend you, you know, can take you a long way.
Thanks, Mona. I know it's
real briefly, can I just add, at public interest organizations, a lot of times they'll have like certain committees that different people sit on, and there'll be an opportunity for an extern or intern to attend those committee meetings. I would say take that opportunity and attend those committee meetings. Or if they throw like a gala or something and they want volunteers, take that opportunity and be a volunteer at those events, because you come across a lot of people and tend to meet a lot of people there.
And show your value as a intern, worker, just a helper, that the staff will remember you, the director of the agency may remember you. So let's talk a little bit about finances. In the public interest community, you know, it is expected that you're going to make less than private sector. And now, although, you know, who knows with where we are with the amount of jobs available, but in the past, there's also, as Mona even mentioned, it was almost a privilege to get a public interest position. It's sometimes a competition, and it's hard to secure. So can you all share your thoughts on, and you know, if you've had any challenges with navigating this career, and the any loans or financial hardships or the struggles that you've had, and how you've been able to overcome them? Kejai, I see you nodding. Do you mind starting with this one?
Sure. I adjunct. That is how I bring in supplemental income, because the income that I make is just, it's not enough. So that's a way that I could supplement my income. And so you can look for different ways to supplement your income if that's something that you need to do. I know for me, I needed to start adjuncting just because I had some health complications, and I was on a fellowship at the time. And that fellowship is a set amount of money. And quite frankly, it was $50,000. And that just wasn't, and then after taxes and after benefits coming out, it was significantly less than that. And so I started to drown in debt, and I'm like, I need to find something else that could supplement my income so I could be sustainable, in this area of practice that I want to practice in. Because before I came back to public interest, I took up a clerkship and I was miserable. I'm just like, this is not for me. This is not what I want to do. And so if you have to supplement your income, then find ways to supplement your income. And as a law student, if whatever you're getting paid from the internship, if that's not enough, then find something on the side that you can do that can also help you along the way. I know for me in law school, up until a certain point, I tutored on the weekends and in the evenings. So just find different ways that you could supplement your income where it won't overwhelm you to the point where you can't effectively do your full-time work.
Thank you, and good recommendations. Mona, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Sure. So I lived off loans for a very long time. That was kind of my way through law school. And then obviously repaying those loans became a big concern. The nice thing is that with this work, you know, you do this work for 10 years, and there is the opportunity to have loan forgiveness, which is kind of huge. And that's kind of where I put all my focus, to be able to do this work as long as I have been. There's also a lot of loan repayment assistant programs out there. I know our employer offered them. There were also outside agencies. I know my law school offered them. And I would say just through a lot of those programs, I got, you know, decent chunks of money each year to help cover my bills, my expenses, to also be able to stay doing this kind of work. So really, you know, it's going to be what works for you to be able to do it. was something else that I was thinking that was a good, well, I think one of the things also I didn't realize when I did get out was, you know, the pay obviously is not great, but outside of working in some, you know, very large law firm, a lot of my friends who were starting out in, you know, small practices or medium-sized practices, they were making almost the same amount of money I was making. But I had a lot more benefits. I had a lot more time off, which was really important for me because when I went to law school, I had 3 little kids. So like I wanted to have as much time with my family as I could. And that paid off for me personally much more than, you know, making a little more money. And my friends who were in private practice in a small firm, making what I was making, yes, with a potential to make more, but did not have the kind of vacation and benefits that I had. So I always kind of felt like maybe I was better off than them. So you have to kind of see what way works. There's definitely ways to make it work, but it's, you know, it just depends on kind of what works for your personal situation.
Patrick, what about your thoughts on the finances piece to public interest?
So, as we would say in court, so stipulated, particularly what Mona just mentioned, which is that I have been the beneficiary of Loyola's LRAP program, the Loan Repayment Assistance Program. And I also am a beneficiary of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And I hope, like Mona, just given that we've been out of law school around the same time, that we're around the same time of forgiveness too. April 2023, I will have my loans forgiven, and I count down every day. It is coming. It finally feels like it is near. So that's really exciting. And so take full advantage of those programs. On a personal note, I will say that I have the great benefit privilege of being married, and being a dual income earning household does set me apart from many of my colleagues. And so I recognize that is a privilege I have. My wife is a research scientist. It's not like she's, you know, the general counsel at Kirkland & Ellis. I mean, she's, but by being a dual income household, it certainly has made, for me personally, the pay differential between the private sector and the non-private sector more manageable. So I will say that. The last thing I will say too is I am part of this small cohort of executive directors in the Chicagoland area that have been forcefully yet respectfully advocating for the Chicago Bar Foundation to resurrect its recruitment and retention study. So the Chicago Bar Foundation in 2006, some of you may have even been in middle school in 2006, I have no idea, but long time ago did their recruitment and retention study, which found, by the way, that our salaries and benefits were abysmal as a sector. And a lot of change happened following 2006. Not as much as I think the industry wanted to, particularly because then in 2008, we had the economic crash. But that study really prompted change and some greater transparency within the public interest sector. And so I'm happy to tell you that you're entering into a sector that will be doing, yet again, another recruitment and retention study in 2021, 2022. And so hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, we'll be able to report out on, you know, what are starting salaries now? What is the average? What are average 10-year out law graduates making within the sector? What are managers making? What are supervisors making? What are executive directors making? And I think that having benchmarks as an industry, as a sector that we can move towards is something that is laudable, and a goal that I have for the sector. I know that many in our sector qualify for our services. And let that sink in for a second. And that is disgusting. I'm disgusted by that. And you all should be too. And I really hope that we as a sector can come together and change benefits and change salaries, because there are such phenomenal people that enter into this workforce, and I hate when I lose talented people to the private sector. It is probably my number one disappointment, and so we have to do better. But I think we have to do it collectively. It's really hard for one agency to say, we're going to give better benefits and salaries. It has to be all of us doing it together. So off my soapbox, Brent.
No, thank you. And excited to hear about the retention study happening. So my next question is something I think we've all been talking about a lot more as we've been in this pandemic, which is self-care. And I think that even before that was a term that everyone was talking about, it was something that people were talking about in the legal aid community, because it's so common for people who are working with clients who've experienced trauma to bear that. And we've been talking about that with our interns who are working possibly for the first time in this community. So one, if you all have any self-care practices that you have that you want to share, that would be really interesting, I think, to know how you handle self-care, any tips that you have for new attorneys in the field. But then also, I guess, any thoughts that you've had about or things that you've seen that might be good advice for new attorneys on how not to fall into the burnout, how to kind of preventative measures, whether as an intern this summer, but even just as a new attorney who's interested in this line of work. Anyone want to take first stab at that question?
I will say, I will say for me, my self-care journey, especially this particular year, has been a whirlwind. Just because when I first started in my office, like the pandemic hit, boom. And then my caseload like significantly accelerated because we had some turnover in the office. And so I was just like, okay, a lot just got dumped on me at once. And so for me, I try to continue to do the things that I love, right? I love to travel. So I try to find time where I can travel that fits within my budget. Exercise helps a great deal. Sometimes I take people breaks. It's just what it is. I am single. I don't have any kids. So I have the luxury of doing that. I do understand that privileged position I'm in. So I'll text my friends, I'll text my family, and I'll say, hey, I'm about to take a people break for 1 to 2 days. My phone is going on do not disturb. You will not hear from me. If you text me, I will not respond. If you call me, if it's an emergency, call me twice and the call will come through. Aside from that, I'm taking a people break and it's just me. So I kind of sort of shut out the noise. And then I will do different things, whether it's just read, whether I light some candles and drink some wine, or whether I watch a mindless TV show where I don't have to put much thought into it. And it's not a lot of drama involved with it because vicarious trauma is very real. And then on top of that, you're dealing with your own trauma that you have. I also see a therapist and I make sure to see my therapist. Even when I think I don't need to see her anymore, I maintain seeing my therapist, okay? Because it really works. So I would just say, try to still do things you love, spend time with your family and friends, because I do know for me, there was a point where I was just like, I don't have the time. I can't do it. I don't have the time. And I was absolutely miserable. And then when I started making time for my family and friends again, then things changed for me and it helped to have that balance and to do that. So just make time for the things that you love, the things that you care about, and the things that you enjoy. And it's okay to take a step back and say, okay, hey, I need a breather. and I'm going to take that breather and I'm going to put me first. Because in this field, since we're in the helping profession and we're in public interest, we tend to not put ourselves first. We tend to put everyone else first. And so I had to learn that this year, specifically, like, it's okay. And it was actually like my supervisor and my office mentor that told me, like, Keisha, it is okay to take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're no good to anybody else. And that is very true. That is very real, because it was a point where I was having panic attacks and I was like, okay, I seriously need to take care of myself. And just make sure, if when you need to, take care of yourself, check in with yourself, see where you are, see where your meter is. And so sometimes for me, I'll be like, I'm in the red zone. I need to take a half a day, right? Because I need to take care of myself, because there's a lot of things that are rolling in and they're affecting me. So yeah, just make sure you do things you love. Make sure to still spend time with your family and friends if that's something that you enjoy doing and that's something that's important to you. And make sure to constantly check in with yourself and see where you're at, so that you can refill your meter and get back to your green level, so that you can be as effective as you normally are.
Thanks, Keisha. Thank you for sharing all that. Patrick, what about you? Your self-care practices?
So I think I'm going to pull some of what Keisha just talked about, and I assume there will be a theme, but one, I think, let me start again and say, you will work hard, particularly as a new attorney in this field. Okay, you will work hard. With that said, you have to shut it off, and you have to set boundaries. And I think you have to find the right balance, and you have to find the right balance that feels good for you. I'm going to say something that probably will scare all of you, or some of you, but it works for me. I get up at 4:30 in the morning. I know, I do. I'm an incredible morning person. I get so much done between 4:30 and 6:30 in the morning. And you know when I turn it off? I turn it off at 5:01. I am done for the day. I go home, I cook dinner for my family, I put my kids to bed, I exercise, I watch an hour of stupid television with my wife, I go to bed, and I start again. I mean, I do think that, and by the way, I have not always done that. So don't think, like Keisha, I think that I've had to figure out what works for me, and that works for me. It won't work for you, and it may work for you. I mean, yeah, that's the whole point, is you got to figure out what you need. But I have a feeling, I know Mona hasn't talked, but I do have a feeling that the theme of our response to this question is, you have to find boundaries, and you have to put them up, and you have to shut off at some point. And I think it just depends on what that looks like for you. But that's my advice.
Thanks. Mona, what are your thoughts?
So this is not a topic I'm great at. So I definitely was taking notes from what Keisha shared, what Patrick shared, because I could definitely be better in this category. But to reiterate what they said, boundaries, like even remote working at 5 o'clock, I walked away from my computer and I turned it off and I didn't look at it till the next day, no matter what. Because you really do want your outside of work life to be just as exciting and fun and fulfilled as your work life will be, because it will be very busy and it will be very meaningful, the work you do. So it matters, and you need to be there and you be completely present. And something else I've always been good at doing, and I think it was just because I had kids in my early career as an attorney, was I took time off like regularly. And that would just be, every month I took a day or half a day off. I mean, hopefully you'll have that opportunity. If you don't have a day, you take half a day, because it really will recharge you to just step away, have a little time to yourself. I mean, I definitely want to try this whole people break thing. I was like, oh my God, my life would change if I did something like that. That would be amazing. Because you do need to do that. I would also say, I know people in my office, they play sports, they compete, they play musical instruments, they're in a band, You know, those kinds of things to have are just great outlets. Whatever it is that gives you joy, keep doing it. Don't stop because, you know, you're heavily immersed in your first year or whatever. Maybe you won't do it as much as you want to, but keep doing it. For me, it's definitely travel. I mean, travel is my love. That and cleaning my house, which I know is really sad. But if I take time off, I'm just like doing the things I want to do that make me happy, and you feel recharged to get back to work and to get to the serious work that you're doing.
Thanks, Mona.
Oh.
So I have one final question before we kind of just go into quick final tips. And it's maybe gearing us up a little bit for next week when we have a whole session on postgraduate fellowships. But I wanted to get your all's take on postgraduate fellowships. Kejai, I know you were a fellow with Equal Justice Work. I think that's right. Maybe will you share your experience a little bit as a fellow, and then maybe then we'll hear from Patrick and Mona on as a supervisor or any other experience that you've had. But Kejai, to you first.
Sure. So I did a postgraduate fellowship through my school, Loyola, in my, what I call my gap year, because I was still finishing my last year of my master's program. So I did a postgraduate fellowship with Chicago Volunteer Legal Services because it allowed me the flexibility that I needed with my internship and my classes. And that was amazing. I loved Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. And then for my Equal Justice Work Fellowship, so there was a grant that came down, and a lot of public interest organizations across the nation received that grant to hire individuals to work with human trafficking victims and survivors. And so how I found that fellowship was through my school's website, my school's job website. As an alumni, I still have access to it, and I stalk it. Whenever I want to make a transition, I stalk that website. And so that's how I found it. I was just going through, looking at what's available, what's open, and I saw these fellowships, and they were at a number of legal aid organizations here in Chicago. And I interviewed with Legal Aid Society, and I ended up getting offered the position like the next day, which was amazing. And I started it. I loved it. Loved my supervisor there. It was very flexible. And then the thing about Equal Justice Works is they have like an annual meeting where everybody who's an Equal Justice Work fellow will come to that meeting. And so it's basically like this big week of networking that you're involved in. And they have this big gala at the end where donors will come to the gala. And so it's made where you're seated at a table with either the person that sponsored you or just with people in general who sponsor different fellows that are there. And since the government sponsored my fellowship, I was always at a table with either someone from a private firm who also happened to practice in human trafficking work, or some executives or somewhere. Or one year I was sitting with the executive director of Equal Justice Works' wife, sitting right next to her, and she was amazing. And I made that connection with her because she told me she was coming to Chicago. But that fellowship gave me, one, it put me back in public interest. It put me back in legal aid, and it gave me the opportunity to gain new skills in a different area of law that I had never touched before. And also with that, it helped me learn how to navigate the public interest world better, if that makes sense, especially with me going to the things that Equal Justice Work have and just being in like the different sessions and meeting different people. And it helped me learn as well the vast number of positions that exist within the public interest work world. So it also helped me start to sort of chart my future and where I see myself ending up in like the next 7, 8, 10 years, or, you know, when I become a quote unquote senior attorney in the field, where would I want to land within the public interest world?
Patrick, you mentioned getting lots of fellowship requests. Any quick tips that you have for folks who this summer are thinking about that, and anything that they should be talking about with prospective agencies?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just repeat what I said before, which is hopefully if you are pursuing the fellowship track, the organization that you would like to sponsor you, you have a relationship with that organization. They know you, they've worked with you, because at least with me, cold calls, cold emails saying, hey, will you sponsor me for my fellowship? You got a lot of proving to do before I say yes. Whereas we have an EJW fellow that's starting in September. We approached him, right? I think that because he had clerked here for a year and a half, and knowing that I didn't necessarily have the resources to hire him as a staff attorney, we approached him and said, we would really love to sponsor you as an EJW. And he was shocked. So sometimes the invitation could come from the organization, but the conversation is far easier if we know you. So that would be my advice. And then Brent, I have a 1 o'clock meeting.
No worries.
I have to hop off, but it's been such a pleasure being with you, Keisha and Mona. And thank you, Brent, for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Patrick. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Mona, do you have any, maybe even just final advice or tips that we didn't get to that you'd want to impart for, we have 1 minute left. Any last words for everyone that you would impart?
Well, thank you for letting me do that. I would just say, find what you really want to do with your degree. And I think that will help you get through whatever struggles you may see. I mean, work is in general, you're going to have issues with people you work with supervisors, with funding, whatever opportunities. But if you kind of are doing the work you love, I think you can get through it a lot easier versus, being somewhere where you're miserable, but you're getting paid. You just want to, I think you'll be able to do what you want to do long term if it's something you care about. And if it isn't, change it. You should be doing what you love. You worked hard to earn this degree. It's a powerful degree. So that's kind of my only tips. And thank you, Brent, for inviting me on. This was a wonderful panel. You had really good questions, everybody.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mona. Thank you, Keisha, and thanks to Patrick. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.